Give me now an example of how that money went to building tunnels.
Help me understand is the phrase, Ian. If you're watching this, the phrase is, can you help me understand how you came to this conclusion step by
Wow,
step?
man. And
And
all
just
the
show
other
me
points.
the evidence along the way so I can understand your position. It's a very gentle question. It's used in problem solving all the time. So it's not a malicious thing and it's not something you're taking advantage of the guy. No, you just simply understand, like trying to figure out, like, what did he pick up that you didn't, or what has he picked up that you won't accept as evidence or knowledge? Because you're not going to bomb it away, bro. It's not even all in Palestine. You have to go, like they should have just, I said, right, as soon as it happened, the leaders are in Qatar, leave the civilians out of it. For 6 months, Israel has not listened to Grand Theft World for some reason. I don't know why. We keep giving them good information, like, don't make it worse, man. Don't dig it deeper. But they keep doubling down, and we have to sadly report such things because I don't see like Israel's downfall as being America's upswing in any way. I see us as strategic allies in the war against terrorism and stuff. So we got to make sure that good things are happening over there, and good things are not happening with Bibi driving everything not so legally, let's say that way. There was no diplomacy. 10-7 was a cry for help from the prisoners who broke through the fences. There was no saying, hey, maybe you guys have a legit grievance. We should sit down and talk about this. Sorry about that. Don't kill any more of our people,
Hey,
please.
hey, this is consistent with patterns in the past. That's right. That's right. Let me just point this out again. What was the point of the disengagement? Again, it was so they didn't have to do peace negotiations with the Palestinians in 2005. Instead, it was quote unquote to improve. You want to talk about doublespeak, to improve Israel's security and international status in the absence of peace negotiations with the Palestinians, which then right after that, 2006, Hamas gets elected. Well, I mean,
How
the
convenient.
coincidences are so overwhelming. And then they have the Madrid quartet who's like, look, fund them. Oh, we got to
Totally
pull the
good.
funding because Hamas, they're a terrorist organization, so they don't get any funding. We got to impose an economic embargo after they said fund them. The inversion of
But
reality.
they could have built hotels, Tony. That's what he wanted you to
Oh,
understand.
Jared Kushner.
But they built tunnels instead.
This is insane,
It's like
man.
they could have bought food for their kids, but
This
they
is
bought big
fucking
screen
insane.
TVs.
Dude, Rich, we literally didn't like this is not it's not like we're going deep research here. We're not
Not
going into
even
the
trying,
books. We're
bro.
not going into the stacks. Like, my
No,
God, they didn't even try at all.
no.
Like these people, they've heard the Hasbara version, the propagandistic version from the Zionist side of how events happen. And then they just went with that saying that must be the facts.
Yeah. Go ahead, let them play a little bit more, and then we'll play Gideon's trumpet. If more people knew what I know and you know about intellectual self-defense and how to stand your ground and challenge these bad ideas, there'd be a lot less frivolous death and genocide and ethnic cleansing able to be done on this planet. So it's like you can't fight them over there. You can fight them between your ears, make yourself less inhabitable by their inaccurate statements. Books talked about in this episode, but we're not necessarily dug out of the stack in time to be timely tonight. Biggest prison on earth, Elon Pappy, Palestine and Israeli School Books by Nurit Palaid Elhanan. Part of our title tonight, Chutzpah, comes from Norman Finkelstein, The Unspoken Alliance. This is the reference I said, South Africa getting nukes from Israel. This is the book for that. Going back to the guy on Timcast, you might want to read a little Elon Poppy, 10 minutes about Israel. The use of AI in Palestine. We've talked about this book on the show before, but it's worth mentioning again, the Palestine Laboratory. Tony mentioned this one just a couple minutes ago. It's The Holocaust Industry by Norman G. Finkelstein. He also mentioned the transfer agreement for Edwin Black, for which he got disowned for. We also mentioned earlier tonight about the Zionists working with the Nazis. This would be the book for that. And for people counting numbers up, there's The Seventh Million, The Israelis and the Holocaust by Tom Segev, a highly studiously referenced book. You got to weigh it on the scale with the claims on the other side, as Tony showed you both sites that he uses for such adjudications and delegations. It's not like you're placing bets at Vegas. There's not an outcome tomorrow. It's an ongoing going topic. So learn a little bit. It's not going to stop anytime soon. You don't have to like cram all that stuff at once, but if you want to understand what's not easily being purveyed, it's what's most valuable and hidden from you to give you understanding, then check out some of these books. So I want to go to this next clip because it fits in so well with what Russell was just saying there in the Jimmy Dore show. And it does go to disprove that Jimmy Dore clip disproves a bunch of what this guy's going to spout. This guy's name, John Nolte. He's from Breitbart. He was on Timcast a couple days ago. I caught a couple minutes of the episode. I made a note to put it in this episode, and I had it from like 3 hours from now. But now, just hearing what Russell had to say in that clip, I bumped it up because that's how it works when you do it live. So we're going to play only a few seconds at a time, probably not for copyright reasons like Jimmy had to do in the clip last week. We're going to do it because the inaccurate sentences come so fast and the fallacies are so profuse that if we don't kind of parse it sentence by sentence, it becomes like a bunch of word salad that many people have heard before because it's a popular word salad out there. But we're going to show a lot of word saladness of it. And then once we show the word saladness, it's like, why the fear mongering? Because a lot of what you're going to hear from that side is not going to be accurate to the evidence we've shown on this show over and over again. So let's go ahead to Timcast with John Nolte.
And I don't see how someone can morally say that what Israel is doing is wrong, because what they're doing is needs to be done, or more people are going to die in the future.
How did the World Central Kitchen thing happen? How do you accidentally target 3 separate vehicles in different areas and kill a bunch of aid workers?
I don't know, but if you start a war, which is what Hamas did, innocent people are going to die. I don't think for a second
please.
that Israel.
Did Hamas start a war? That's an assertion. He said it as a declarative sentence, as if it is a fact. The starting of a war, is that when you put the prisoners, incarcerate them? Like you take people and you put them in prison? Or is it when they fight back against their handlers? I don't know. We'd have to like go and look up. Like,
yeah, the ideology of the cause of this is a little bit troublesome. That's what with Destiny, he got in trouble with so many times because
ideology is a thing, bro. Yeah, there's a timeline that goes on. Exactly. And if you want to say it starts on 10/7, I would say, what about the 1,200 kidnapped people that you call Palestinian prisoners or whatever that you have no legal process for? So Israel kidnapped all the territory first. Yeah. Or if you want to go back to 47, or if you want to go back to 17, or if you want to go back to 1862, again, it wasn't the people who lived there that started any of these things. And if this is the biggest like attack that the Palestinians have ever had on Israel, so I would just say after 80 years and you've killed tens and tens of thousands of them, they made an attack on 10/7 and killed 1,200 of your people who, a couple hundred were civilians, many hundreds were military, many were friendly fire. And if you have a question about that, do a little Google search, because I did it this week. You can't find these images on Brave, but I could find them on Google. You look up 10/7 burnt vehicles, Israel, and you'll see parking lot of burn up vehicles that allegedly Hamas did. But that's Hellfire missiles from drones and helicopters and all sorts of Israel fight back, kill anything near the border, fire. They lifted all the rules that day. And
not to mention, they also...
it matches up with WCK, the kitchen
That's
convoy.
Correct. That's consistent. Their behavior is actually consistent in that regard. Operation Jericho Wall, they had pre-knowledge of this event, and they seemingly either allowed it to happen or just that literally incompetent along a border that's been highly contested.
Or arrogant, because the accusation is that they watch these guys training, and they're like, it's like when, the Americans here see the guys in Al-Qaeda training on monkey bars and stuff.
Yeah.
You don't tend to take it seriously, like they're really scary. Right?
That's a fair point, yeah.
So
all those are in play, yeah.
Yeah. So
there's also, he did a fallacy even before we got into that remark. Something needs to be done or more people will die. That's neither or a fallacy. Does something need to be done of that nature or more people will die? That's interesting to go into a false dichotomy fallacy so quickly. You're either with us or you're with the terrorists. I remember George Bush.
Well, not only that, but his other argument is that he's making that if you kill these people now, it'll end the death later, when that hasn't been going on for 80 years. It's escalating like this. So
correct.
Already he's spoken like 30 seconds.
Yeah.
And it's like, no. And that's how he's starting out. So let's see where he tries to go from here. Go ahead,
He
LT.
starts with a fallacious premise, and it's just going to get worse and worse from here because already the starting point is incorrect.
Well, it's going to get worse.
It's false. Yeah.
Targeted innocent people. Number one, why would they? what's the only thing it could do is hurt them, which of course
Well,
it has.
Well, they did target innocent people. The question is,
Not, I mean, deliberately.
right? Was it an
Right.
accident or otherwise?
I think obviously it was an accident. What's the upside to killing innocent people deliberately? There's no upside.
The aid workers, the upside is they don't get the food and water to the people they're trying to exterminate.
But if they kill those people, I mean, there's all kinds of stuff going in there to help the people in Gaza, to help the civilians, we hope. So knocking out 12 aid workers is not going to make a huge difference in what's going in there.
Pause it, right? Because we just showed you all the stuff that debunks that whole part of the clip.
I already
right?
made the point, so I'll just really quickly reiterate, and then Rich, I want you to follow up with this. UNRWA workers, the Flower Massacre, and now this missile strike. Is there a pattern of behavior here, Richard? I'm just wondering.
Well, they had to torture those UNRWA workers, Tony, to get them to confess. So it's okay, because when they do it, it's good.
Oh, confessions by torture reminds me of something else too.
Abu Ghraib. I have the CIA torture.
Well, even beyond that, but yeah.
It's over here somewhere.
I think it's on your top right. Oh, never mind.
No, I got it. Because you need to know, it's like nothing new under the sun. This has all been done before, but they need their own Abu Ghraib situation, I guess. Right. So, all right. So now,
in the past, but that
he said they have to kill them all now, so there won't be death in the future, which is a fallacy. And then he set up another thing that wasn't true. And now he's setting this assertion that, again,
that they're not targeting innocent civilians. He's saying they're not targeting, but like there's a pattern.
Wait till we get to Lavender and Where's Daddy, bro? Like we're going to tear this little piece of, nothing against John Nolte. I'm sure he's a nice guy. I'm attacking the arguments and I'm not doing ad hominem to attack him.
No, again, I don't know anything about this guy.
I'm sure we would jive on many points. However, the points he's proliferating to a multi-million person audience on the Timcast are not accurate of reality, and he could easily learn his way out of things if it didn't maybe put him at odds with his employer, like a Candace Owens type of story. That would be why he'd be like, no, I can't see those facts.
Who's he work for?
He works for Breitbart, who trains Steven Crowder.
Oh yeah, that's Christian Zionism. That's Christian Zionism.
It's the other Daily Wire, bro.
Yeah. That's ironically, that's what they are. Yes, that's very true. Well, all right. Yeah.
So now you understand his training and angle, and he's there to protect. He's there to make sure Christian soldiers are like the Christian Zionist soldiers. So let him unfold another "woe is Israel," they're the perpetual victim type of point, straw man, so we can tear it down. And go ahead with the rest of the clip, LD.
So knocking out 12 aid workers is not going to make a huge difference in what's going in there. All it's going to do is what's happened to Israel, what we all know was going to happen to Israel, which is Biden turned against them and public opinion turned against them. There's no upside to killing those aid workers.
One of the thoughts I had while you were explaining that is that because Hamas started the war, Israel has the right to kill civilians.
No, I didn't say that.
It's not their fault. Their hand was forced.
Real quick. I'm sorry.
So I disagree.
I'm so really sorry. I promise to let it go longer.
No, that's fine. That's what this clip is about.
The idea that there's no upside at all. No upside at all in regards to killing those aid workers, in regards to we already see the upside, at least if you were a pragmatic Zionist, especially in the military or the IDF, is that all these different aid organizations have halted their work, or any work that they may have been doing in the Gaza Strip is halted now. Like that's a major benefit. That is 100%. Like I said, if they are full gung-ho, like we have to do the genocide now, no matter how bad it looks, no matter how bad it gets for us, we have to do it now. There is a major reason why they would. Same with the Flower Massacre. Same with the demonization of the UNRWA workers based on confessions by torture. Like this is just to act like he doesn't understand the strategic value.
Yeah, he works at a news company, bro.
I mean, did not even consider the possibility what the strategic value would be, and juxtaposed to.
But he doesn't need to keep his job. You understand what I'm saying? Like to work at Breitbart, it's convenient not to see those things. So I understand, and I don't have anything against him. But again, these points he's making, it's a bunch of small points, and they add up to. I don't want to spoil it for you, so I won't tell you specifically. But he like debunks himself at the end. And like does a whole thing that was like the crescendo of the clip, and I was like, "That's it right there." So like he's building up to that. But right now, I just want to address like, as he has a declarative sentence, let's just compare it to reality and let's see which of these things are true. Because he says a couple things here that are kind of extreme, which is what caught my ear in the first place. Because it's like I don't know, can you quote Yoda as wisdom? But only the Siths think in such extremes.
Absolutes, yeah, an absolute. Only a
Absolutes,
only a
right.
Sith thinks in absolutes. Right?
Only a Sith thinks in absolutes. So, too early for that. Let's
As
go
Ewan
ahead.
McGregor. It wasn't the
Continue to
first
play the
name.
clip. Yes.
Civilians,
No,
or
I didn't say that.
It's not their fault. They were their hand was forced. So I disagree, because if a country were to like invade my borders and start a war, and then I go total war on them and start bombing their cities and killing them, I don't have the right to blame them for me killing all those civilians. I made that choice.
But you have Israel has a moral obligation to exterminate Hamas. They have to do it, and that's going to say
Israel has a
thinks in
moral
absolutes. Indeed, you're right.
Israel has a moral obligation to destroy Hamas. Okay, now let's just consider that, because I don't know if it's right or wrong. So let's do something like look up Hamas. And what are they? They are a political and military movement. So now I can understand destroying a military movement. Trying to destroy a political idea, bro. What's your plan for that? How's that worked out in the past? Aren't you just going to spread it? Isn't it like a grease fire? The more attention you give it and the harder you fight it, the more it spreads, right? It's kind of like anti-Semitism. There's a thing, there's a trend going on. So to try to exterminate Hamas is quite a claim. First off, Gaza is not Hamas. Gaza is governed by Hamas since 2005, 2006. Hamas is not 2 million civilians in a city. It's a couple brigades of some unorganized people who are armed like with prison shivs, because they live in an open air concentration camp. They don't really have a real military aspect that's allowed to take root and proliferate like what's on the other side of the prison fence, right? So there's kind of like that problem. And then you got the number of women and children in Gaza who are instantly equated with Hamas. And when you equate all Palestinians with Hamas, you equate them with their government. We try not to do that. Like when we talk about people of other countries, we're talking about their governments, not the people in those countries. We're all subjugated to ideas that we didn't create and didn't agree to, and we're learning our way out together, right? Now, this other part about exterminate, bro, I always like try to balance things and try to like shoe on the other foot, because you need two shoes to walk around, right? If you try it on the other side, is anyone talking about exterminating Israel? Oh, wait. That's in the Hamas charter, I heard. Not the updated charter, but the original charter from 1988, 87, right? Let's say they wrote that type of stuff down. So that sounds like some hate language. And I would tend to agree with Israel, because that sounds like this group is very unreasonable. They're very violent and they want to kill you off. So I would defend against it. Except I learned about 1977 Likud charter that says river to the sea in its first line, basically declaring that they're going to purge all the Arabs and Palestinians out of Judea and Samaria and the Gaza Strip, that it's all going to be Israel, and that it's going to be a political, religious state that doesn't include them. So now it's like, wait a minute, who got there first? Well, if you want to go back 3,000 years, there's a bunch of stories. But if you want to get back to the last 100 years, there's a bunch of indigenous people who lived there already. And then there's a bunch of other people who lived in Europe who decided in the 1860s, for the next couple decades, to start moving there. And then some other convenient political things happened that brought about a real strong justification for the move. And the Zionists might have worked with Tiny Mustache Man's people to help get that move going on. So with all those facts that we've put on the record in evidence form on this show heretofore, let's continue with this Timcast clip. Go ahead.
Point out two fallacies here that are interesting. Hasty generalization, to which you alluded to, but also post hoc ergo propter. It happened, therefore the cause was this one specific thing.
Yes.
You know, these are sort of inductive fallacies. It gets frustrating. The idea of moral obligation, I like how you disambiguated between ideas versus property, or people/property, if you want to, however you want to think of it, like actual physical things, actually existence in reality. Because what is the moral obligation? Is the moral obligation to uphold individual rights, regardless of one's faith or one's skin color or one's sexual orientation or whatever?
Even if it's self-defense, then I would say the prisoners, the occupied people, have the right to resist.
That's a fair point. And so like this whole moral obligatory standpoint he's arguing from, well, define what you mean by morals. Define what your morals are. What are your morals and your ethics or your values? He has not done a good job of doing that. And in that capacity, or because essentially every time he throws out this moral obligation. He gets into either or fallacies, hasty generalizations, post hoc ergo propter hoc, a whole bunch of different inductive sort of fallacies. Like, well, it's this because they did this, or this happened, therefore this was the cause, or he just instantly casts, to your point, somehow most of the civilian population is Hamas, which is not true, but he's sort of hastily generalizing about a quality of the entire population. Well, can we talk about how we possibly got there?
I'm trying to get it in frame. I do have an entry here for morality.
Mm-hmm.
Morality. What is morality or ethics? It's a code of values to guide man's choices and actions. The choices and actions that determine the purpose and the course of his life. Ethics, as a science, deals with the discovering and defining of such a code. First question that has to be answered. Pardon all my bookmarks here. Let me move my mic over. The first question that has to be answered as a precondition of any attempt to define or judge or accept any specific system of ethics is, why does man need a code of values? Let me stress this. The first question is not, what particular code of values should man accept? The question is, does man need values at all, and why? Ethics, and then it goes into ethics is an objective metaphysical necessity of man's survival.
Oh, wow. That's very.
Now let me zoom in there for you. Now this next comes for a quote from John Galt's speech in Atlas Shrugged. Man has been called a rational being, but rationality is a matter of choice. And the alternative his nature offers to him is this: rational being or suicidal animal.
Oh,
I mean, medical assistance in dying because you're bored, right? It's interesting, right?
Or
if you paid attention for 3 hours, 2 hours, you can get the point. Man has to be man by choice. He has to hold his life as value by choice. He has to learn to sustain it by choice. He has to discover the values it requires and practice his virtues by choice. A code of values accepted by choice is a code of morality. Now, I could go on, but as you notice, I've already read this book. I have many, many, many bookmarks, and I highlighted this a long, long time ago. So my question would be, here's your reference.
What is his code of values?
When he makes that statement, what is his reference for a code of values?
Yes.
Because I'm not saying this is the Bible on the topic, but these are non-contradictory definitions that assemble themselves into a body of understanding that I have not seen better than this out there.
And
so I use the best tool available.
And we predicate what he has said. In other words, what he said about what needs to be done. It's always within a sort of a standpoint of collectivism. So he's viewing everything as a very simple, we can look at as a simple, what's it called? Special case fallacies, hasty generalizations, all these various types. So really what he's doing is he's unfairly representing through his own biases, a whole group of individuals and saying that represents the totality of what needs to be done. So his values are very collectivistic. It's very prescriptive in that capacity. It's also, there's another fallacy, the fallacy of composition in play. There's a lot of fallacies with this guy. And it really has to do with the fact that he's not doing the due diligence, to your point, Rich, all the time about he's not reading, he doesn't understand the nuance to this topic. He doesn't understand the history seemingly to this topic. Or if he does, he's purposely neglecting those aspects, another fallacy, in order to build a straw man arguments to support his collectivistic narrative that it's really...
That's a way to keep a job
that Judaism is, as a collective, has an existential threat, which is all these other people as a collective,
but
and they have
that
been
as
this
preservative
simple
force, as we showed 3 episodes ago. So you're on it. You're in it to win it right there.
Yeah,
we're getting closer. All right, so at this point we have
we can say his ethic is based on sort of that. So that's right. Just to finish it, based on the sort of collectivistic, prescriptive mindset of not having any sort of nuance, viewing not as individuals but as collectives.
Which is contradictory to Christian Zionism and individualism of conservative in his audience.
Right. Exactly. Well said. Very well said.
So the angles and aspects thus far, the extermination thing was really what caught my ear, because that's a very absolute thing and includes a lot to exterminate rather than just kind of fend off. Right? It's no longer self-defense when you're seeking to exterminate. And I just want to say, hypothetically, If a group of people said, let's go steal this land, and then they went and stole the land, and then they had to hold the land by force, fraud, coercion, and deception, this strategy kind of fits in with that scenario, which he might admit to at the end of this clip, whether he meant to or not. So let's go ahead and see, what is it moral? I guess it's moral to your imperative to survive. If it's been like surviving through taking somebody else's house and trying to keep it, you would just I guess that's what you do. But I don't understand his perspective. I'm seeking to understand more. So we're going to continue to listen to him with an open mind, at least to his argument. That's what I'm saying.
Has a moral obligation to exterminate Hamas. They have to do it. And that's going to save lives. It's like dropping bombs on Japan, atomic bombs on Japan. That was a moral thing to do. It ended the war and it saved lives. And if you let Hamas go on,
bullshit,
especially after what happened October 7th, you're going to.
Okay, James Bryant Conant was president of Harvard University. His granddaughter wrote some books, The Irregulars, about how MI6 invaded and infiltrated American intelligence in World War II. And she also wrote this book, Tuxedo Park. This is the Wall Street Tycoons, and these were the projects that kicked off the Manhattan Project and changed the course of World War II. And it starts in, if I remember correctly, Alfred Lee Loomis. He started these experiments and was going after these goals in 1929. And then later, 10 years later, in 1939, then it starts picking up. So, and here's Lord Rothschild involved, just in case you needed to have a little tidbit of why you want to get a book like that. But the point being, it wasn't Tiny Mustache Man or the Japanese, Tojo, Hirohito, whoever was over there at the time, that necessitated World War II, or the atomic weapons program. The atomic weapons program they started thinking about it before they even had an enemy. Almost like they needed an enemy to go use it on.
Foundation of how much energy is conserved in mass had been well understood for a couple of decades by that point, I think, or at least by a decade by that point, by looking at the 1910s into the 1920s. So, of course, they're going to come up with a justification. It's the same way with the pandemic preparedness nonsense, pathogens of pandemic, or whatever. Yeah. So all that sort of nonsense, potential, pathogens of pandemic potential. Well, it's inevitable that they lead with this false assumption, this false premise. So it's inevitable that other bad actors are going to work with this. So we have to work with this and develop a vaccine or therapy, some sort of remedy alongside of it, in order to neutralize the threat. So they start off with a false premise that it's inevitable that it's going to happen, therefore we have to do it.
Yes.
It sort of gives them, and that's the same thing happened with the nuclear bomb. And then they have to find later moral arguments, post hoc ergo propter. It happened, therefore this is the cause. So we dropped the bomb. Now we have to come up with a justification, the moral justification for dropping the bomb. There's been a lot of alternative histories. I'm not saying I agree with all of them in regards to whether or not we really needed to drop the bomb in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And the fallout of that was quite, horrific for those who went through it. I mean, so that's a little bit too, again, he's working with these very hasty generalizations, these very simple, like categorical ideas that are encompassing a lot of nuance. He's refusing, and that builds straw men because he's not looking into any sort of nuance to say, hey, was that a moral imperative? Were there ways possibly that we could have, dealt with the Japanese in the Pacific theater without having to, kill? And I think I forget if they were even considered military sites in total, or if that was, I think it was literally shock and awe, or at least one of them, in regards to the indiscriminate killing of civilians to showcase the type of military power that we have.
Well, he's going to justify Dresden here in a second, but he's justifying.
What? He's going to justify Dresden?
He's justifying nuking Japan because that's how we had to end the war. The war was going to end anyway. They nuked it anyway. They started the nuclear program before the Japanese and the Nazis were even a problem. And the British got us into World War II in a disingenuous way. They had spies with the Japanese and the Nazis that had planned Pearl Harbor. And as of August 1941, according to the former director of MI6 at the time, J.C. Masterman, they didn't tell us because they wanted to get us into the war.
Yeah, they had to get us into the war.
This is known, right? So there might be another country today trying to get us into a war, and we got this guy sitting there at Timcast spouting a bunch of talking points that he did not originate and did not come from the roots of his research. We can all
there's actually two countries that need us to get into wars. Let's not forget about Ukraine as well. Ukraine very much so wants us to get into that war. So and then Israel as well, potentially.
Well,
if it becomes belligerent, the whole situation becomes so bellicose that it becomes out of control. But
all right, let's go back to Timcast and let's see if we can get through a few more minutes, because we have to. It's a 10-minute clip, so we have to get through like some parts here.
Atomic bombs in Japan. That was a moral thing to do. It ended the war and it saved lives. And if you let Hamas go on, especially after what happened October 7th, you're going to see a lot more civilians. It's going to be like Iraq and Afghanistan. 20 years of hell. Civilians, this immoral moral war that you let go on for decades and decades.
So
my concern
couldn't they go to where's the leadership? The Hamas leadership currently at? Aren't they in like Qatar?
A bunch of them are in Qatar, yeah.
Yeah. So why doesn't the U.S. and Israel just actually go and put them in cuffs?
I don't think it's that easy. I mean, if they hide among civilians, plus you got to get.
Oh, they're not. They're like, I'm pretty sure these are public facing people who like one guy went on TV.
Plus you have to take away their ability to wage war again, and that's what they're doing going into Gaza.
They don't have the ability to wage war.
Stop
You know,
the
it's
clip,
not.
yeah.
We don't have.
They don't have the
it.
ability. Yeah. Go ahead.
Right. I mean, they ordered some stuff from Alibaba. They cut through a fence. They hit some civilians that Israel placed there, knowing they were in danger, having read the Jericho wall plans.
Right.
Hamas hit those people, and Israel friendly fire hit those people. So you can't credit one side or the other with the whole thing. You have to consider them both part of the whole.
Hey, not to mention. Oh, good.
When he says what happened on 10/7, I would stop him as an interviewer and say, from your perspective, what happened on 10/7? Because a lot of things happened that day.
Good point. Yeah. Well
Are you
said.
including friendly fire? Are you excluding the legit stuff that Hamas did that was atrocious and war crimey? Because hitting civilians, women and children, that sort of stuff is never a go in any wartime setting. That's for cowards, right?
Nope.
But
That
if
goes
you're
for thousands
Hamas
of years,
and you're
it's been
resisting against military, and some civilians get in the way, and then they do friendly fire, and they make it into a bigger thing and blame it all on Hamas, that's also disingenuous. And if your enemy's so bad, why do you have to make stuff up on a consistent basis about it?
And let's not forget. Let's talk about this. This guy has it in his eyes. That sort of war hawk, sort of, and that's just a. I'm not saying it is, but it seems like he has that sort of fire in him about the necessity, the absolute necessities, either or fallacies, hasty generalizations, these broad brush strokes of painting whole groups of people and ideologies. But let's just look at it from a pragmatic war sense. We played a bunch of individuals in very, very, very beginning of this. You've in fact found these clips, Rich. People talking about the difficulty of urban warfare, particularly tunnel warfare.
Oh, yeah. He's going to mention the tunnels in a second. That's good for
because
shadow.
they're not dealing with a standing army. They're dealing with you're indiscriminately bombing targets that have nothing to do with the tunnels, because they're not using like bunker buster style bombs. I know they're using this 2,000-pound, but they're for destroying infrastructure. Yeah, they're not for going deep inside and then causing an implosion internally or into the geology, and that's going to collapse the tunnels. They're not doing that. So they're not actually.
It has a 300-meter blast radius so that they can have overlapping circles for when their bulldozers want to come in and build Jared Kushner condos, which is also in this clip, but not in an unironic.
No.
It's not in an unironic way.
Sure.
So let's continue with the clip and get to it.
Plus, you have to take away their ability to wage war again. And that's what they're doing going into Gaza, because it's not, we don't have hospitals. We have hospitals built on top of weaponry. That's the stuff you have to get rid of. It's like the Nazis. You have to not only get rid of Hitler, you have to get rid of Nazis. You have to get rid of Nazism. You have to take away their ability to ever wage war again. That's the only moral.
That's an interesting idea. Can I see your multi-page PDF plan on how that gets done before you kill a bunch of people in the tens of thousands? Anyone got that? Anyone have that plan that he just talked about?
And when he said waging war, that would mean targeting critical wartime infrastructure. Dresden was not a major wartime infrastructure.
No,
that was a civilian.
It was to take away their will to fight by bombing civilians. And it's the British who talked the Americans into firebombing a German city.
That's taking away the will to fight is terrorism. That's this objective terrorism.
Yeah. That's when the deep state got its hooks in America. You can tell, because the war strategy started to be like the British Empire instead of America.
At the very end of the war, the indiscriminate killing of Axis-oriented civilians was out of control. I mean, and also GIs in the German army not associated necessarily with the Nazi party. There's over 1 million. The Eisenhower's death camps, I think that was a thing back. I'm not sure that was just People can research and check it out to see if it's something legitimate or not. But there was a lot of indiscriminate killing of GIs and civilians. So when you hear about just the V2 rockets, yeah, that was horrible what Hitler did and the targeting of British civilians. But it wasn't the only thing going on. Both sides of the war were horribly fucked up. I'm sorry, morally
they're funded
speaking,
by the same people, Wall Street and the
with the
Bolshevik
same goals and
Revolution, Wall
same
Street and
the
Hitler.
same code of values, right? And they have the same, which is internationalism, the sacrifice anyone and everyone to get their utopic internationalist, really it's an international form of communism,
Socialist, utopia,
feudalism,
internationalism. Yeah.
feudalism. Yeah, it's really it's
So he'll talk more about the hospitals and the tunnels, and we'll address that when he makes a stronger claim. But right there, he's just comparing things to the Nazis, which again, imagine the chagrin on the Americans after they bomb all those Japanese and then they get in bed with the Five Eyes, International British Empire Network. And they're like, oh yeah, you didn't really have to bomb those guys. The war was going to be ended, but now you're on the hook for mass murder and we'll out you anytime that it's convenient. Or if they come in and kill our president, it's like there's people here who can, like LBJ, other people rose to power on that, and they could then be hung out to dry at any point for participating in such events. So what's also like often occluded from the picture is like the hand of the empire reaching into America and moving things around, and then everyone thinks, oh, America's the internationalist with 900 bases around the world. Like how many of those weren't British bases that we acquired during World War II? There's a whole changing of the guard, if you will, that happened. But we have to continue with the gentleman from Breitbart elucidating the news for people who don't want to use their views, I guess. Don't want to look at it. They just believe what he says. So let's see if there's any more veracity in his claims than we've already heard.
You have to take away their ability to ever wage war again. That's the only moral outcome.
I thought that too, that it is important to remove the Nazism from the Nazis, so you have normal people again, basically.
Right.
So killing the individuals isn't always the way to get rid of an ideology. And my concern with trying to eradicate Hamas is the blowback. They're killing a lot of innocent people that will then grow up to become even worse terrorizers of the system than the current ones, is my fear. And then that would leave Israel no more justification other than to say we need to eradicate everyone there, because otherwise it will never stop. And that's like the slippery slope I see in the future. I want to avoid.
Well, I think he's underselling it, because it's not only that they start this war, but they started the war and then refused to fight it. They attacked and then hit among the civilian population. And as far as the blowback, if this organization that is the leadership already says, we're committed to wiping you off the face of the earth, like the idea that like, oh, well, just imagine what happens if you make them angry. That's already their mission now. They're already at the end point. So yeah, you do have a problem, but the fact is, right now they control the education system. Right now they're breeding or trying to raise these kids into the next generation of soldiers to fight the Israelis. So like,
I'm not familiar with that gentleman's work, but he is absolutely right. But he's only half right, because you have to apply it to what Israelis teach their kids and the type of trauma-based mind control programming that authors like Nurit Peled Elhanan, Miko Peled's sister, writes about in her books and documentaries and interviews. Because what you'll see is like they'll show you Hamas and it's like, oh, they're doing anti-Semitic stuff against Israelis. But if you see what they're teaching Israeli children, look at Yoav Shamir's documentary Defamation. We've shown it here on the podcast before. It is illustrative of what that type of high drama, heavy trauma schooling indoctrination system does to young people, and it gives them lots of anxiety about things that might not be as grandiose or hyperbolized as what they were told, and it creates danger systematically. So I will see your point, sir, and recognize it. Yes, you're right, but there's also another side that's not being recognized in that conversation whatsoever, and it can't be elucidated right now by Ian, who's trying, but he's lacking the history and the words to be able to like fend against like what is the status quo narrative, which right now is backing genocide, ethnic cleansing, and apartheid.
Yeah, I mean, you're pointing out it's a two quote K fallacy. It's like, well, you too in this case, and that then it's ad hominem. So they're like essentially saying, look, this is what the Palestinians are doing to their youth. But to your point, well, that's what the Jews are doing to their youth. But I'm going to take a step back and saying, is that indeed what the Palestinians are doing to their youth? or are they just pointing out actual truisms? See, I don't know. I'm going to say I truly don't know. Maybe there's an element of Islamic jihad that is percolating within, of course, it wouldn't surprise me considering the destitute situation that the Palestinians have been living under for decades and decades now. But it's hard to is that really systematically what's being taught? Or are they just teaching facts about the Nakba, about the 1967 war, 1973, about, the continuing aggressions, the rise of what happened to the PLO potentially and Yasser Arafat?
That would seem anti-Semitic, Tony, to teach them those kids the truth.
But those are facts. Like, so are we going to say the facts that they're presenting? Maybe they're actually deducing like, hey, we're being occupied and there's like that. See, this is where it becomes so problematic because you're right. There's a tu quoque fallacy going on. Both may be indoctrinating their side, but one may actually be indoctrinating it in a sense. Can you call it indoctrination if it's based on actual facts?
No, one could be educating, and then the Israeli side who dehumanizes Palestinians. Like according to Nurit Peled Elhanan, who we've featured on the show before.
Mm-hmm.
At no time in that curriculum are Palestinians humanized for young Israeli students. They're always shown as Arabs or terrorists or caricatures, and it's like it's kind of like some Jim Crow education.
Yeah. Exactly. It's like a Jim Crow education. It's a sort of a propaganda. It's a sort of a
Hasbara.
Sort of instantiating mind. Yes, exactly. It's a Hasbara versus maybe a form of education like, hey, this is actually what indeed happened, and this is not something new. I remember Jay Dyer had this interesting take. It actually came from someone related to the UN back in the 90s, but the idea was Russia has made a number of somewhat legitimate arguments in regards to about the West and the culture war going on in the West. Yeah, and they're actually correct. The premises are true and the arguments are valid and all these sorts of things. But that's a strategic standpoint. Like it's strategic for them to point out the hypocrisy and the absurdities of what's going on in the West, particularly their culture and the sort of the postmodern sort of doctrine. But that's a sort of strategic standpoint. Okay, but that means there are arguments for strategic standpoints where using facts helps to further your political case, whatever that might be, whatever policies you have in place. So in this case, it actually furthers the like telling them the facts of what happened furthers what Hamas or any other semi-militant group or governmental group would do with the Palestinians. In other words, the facts may be true and the arguments may be valid, but it also may also strategically align with what the Palestinians are hoping for, which is some sort of state, some sort of regaining of their actual ancestral homeland. And it might not be fundamentally propaganda the way the Israelis have to do it, which is tell the inverted lot where they basically say, no, it's because they didn't come to the table in 1947, and even though it was, the Arabs outnumbered us by so much, it was really their fault that the Nakba happened. The Nakba is not what it claims. So they have to invert all these historical narratives.
Omit.
So I'm not seeing that. Or omit, neglected aspect style. You're right. So, so although you're correct, it could be a tu quoque fallacy. I'm not sure because I'm not sure what the Palestinians are being taught. And if they're being taught actual facts of the situation, then, their own logical deduction ends up in a situation where they don't have any economic opportunity, limited access to resources, including food, water, shelter, energy, these sorts of things. And they may deduce that, okay, well, then we're being occupied. And what do you do in a standpoint of occupation? You have two things you can do. You can try to negotiate. That happened with the PLO. How well did that go down? After that, what's left? I'm just asking for
they killed Arafat. They killed Arafat.
That's the point. That's what I'm saying. Yeah, after what happened
hurts a lot of people.
And what happens with the right of return that Norman Finkelstein points out? Like they tried a peaceful march. They tried all these things, and yet, the opposite happens to them.
But one side's likely not telling the truth. For my reference, here's my receipt. Nurit Peled Elhanan. She has at least 2 books on this topic. Palestine in Israeli School Books, Ideology and Propaganda in Education, Library of Modern Middle East Studies, and then Holocaust Education and the Semiotics of Othering in Israeli School Books, which is a hell of a read. And then a couple other books that I don't speak that language. So
that's fantastic.
And her father was a famous general in Israel during the 6 Days War. So it's Matthew Peled was the general, and then Miko Peled and then Nurit is his sister.
Nurit.
And they're both anti-Zionist Jews who are saying it's not against the religious people, it's against the political ideas and machinations done in the name of all these other religious people. And when they're doing underhanded things and not telling the whole truth, and there's innocent being persecuted and murdered in the name of that, I think all involved should be interested in making sure that it gets back into congruency.
What we're seeing here is what's really sad about what we're seeing here is the repetition of these tropes that are being repeated as though they're truisms, as
You're
though
gonna
they've
hear a bunch
actually
of those
done.
coming up.
Yeah.
Save your trope cards. You're gonna be playing them in the next section. All right, let's continue with Timcast interview with John Nolte.
Raise these kids into the next generation of soldiers to fight the Israelis. So like you have to get rid of that. And like, the Nazi example, we did do policies of like denazification. You had to take that stuff out of the education stuff. A lot of stuff that we would consider very like anti-American was done in Europe, where they banned being in Nazi parties and denying the Holocaust and all of that, because that's how extreme the that rooted ideology was in Europe. So it's a similar kind of thing. Like, but again, it's not that they just started the war. It's
hold on. Whoa. He just came with a justification for having no free speech because of the possibility of the reemergence of Nazi ideology or fascist ideology throughout Europe after World War II.
Yeah.
So you can't. So what you're conceding that you do not have good enough arguments somehow to
You
use
don't have a
words
good enough evidence
to
You just
argue
gotta
against
use-
fascism and Nazism. So
Right.
we have to ban. Really? I mean,
And
this
put
is
people in
insane.
cages.
Do you hear what he's saying? First of all, is that is that really the truth as to why there's Holocaust denial laws in so many countries, or is there other machinations behind the scenes because of favoritism paid towards? That's frustrating. Is it really because of free speech, or is it because of undue support for a certain group because of atrocities associated with what was committed now, 80 years ago?
It's like, what if a crime was done to you, and when you reported it to insurance, it was 10 times as much? And then you made a law that said you can't look into your insurance thing.
Right, exactly. Right. There you go. Yeah, that's a wonderful analogy.
Thank
That's
you.
a perfect description. Yes. Wow.
well-
I mean, if you can't use words to argue against fascism because you're afraid that the ideology is too embedded, again, we're into this sort of this post hoc situation where it's possible someone's going they're making this starting assumption that it's going to happen inevitably anyways, which is always false. This assumption that a pathogen, a pandemic potential is going to be worked on by bad actors, or that the nuclear bomb, like we needed it because that someone else is going to do it. Like these post hoc sort of fallacies are very, very convenient and very damaging.
The scariest thing in movies is for Palestinian Arabs to get nuclear weapons. Isn't that like the whole theme of a bunch of Schwarzenegger movies and stuff? Right.
For sure.
I mean, so Israel has nukes, but they say they don't have nukes, which is like, bro, we all know about Dimona and JFK, and that's been going on 50, 60 years. Why do you guys still not acknowledge? We know about South Africa and your dealings with them. Why do you still deny it? It's kind of seeing like a pattern of deception going on right there.
Yeah, it's like an ad ignorantium combined with a post hoc. So it's like arguing from ignorance, but arguing that because certain events happened, that it's inevitable that other events are going to happen, which is totally false. And then using that as justification for why they need to do what they're supposedly doing, or actually doing in this case.
It's like killing people now to save people in the future, according to the ideology.
This is no different.
You can kill an ideology, and they can do it.
This is literally no different from Peter Singer and then like his acolytes, than like Will McCaskill and the futurism people. Would literally Will McCaskill has argued, Maddie Bannon pointed this out in her brilliant article about SPF and this ethical altruism. That is this new branch of altruism that's emerging through this futuristic movement. And this idea, I remember one of the arguments during a debate with a theologian, which was terrible at debating, with Will McCaskill, he made the argument that one should save if babies are burning in a building and you have the chance to save either a baby or two or a Mona Lisa, which one should you save? You just save the Mona Lisa. Why? Because you could take, according to Will McCaskill, this is obviously insane that he would say that, but Will McCaskill argued that it would be your moral duty to save the Mona Lisa over the burning baby. Why? Because his argument, and this goes to all these futurists these ethical altruists, is that you can sell the Mona Lisa and benefit more people by the sale of the Mona Lisa through the money you'd get, and then the help you can give them through, investing in their futures, than you could by saving that one or two babies. Yes, I'm
But
not
that
kidding.
baby you burned was going to come up with a cure for cancer and actually get it past the censors.
Exactly.
So he just
That's the
excused human sacrifice. He's like, here's why we burn babies, everybody.
That is this new version of altruism that's been permeating from Peter Singer is essentially the modern day justification for human sacrifice. They can do this.
Where's Daddy
for anything?
Where's Daddy? They use Lavender AI and they use Where's Daddy to make sure the guy's in his house with all his other family members when they blow him up. How's that not like that times 50 what we were just talking about?
Exactly. So this is what it's called. I think I was saying it.
There should be a word for like burnt sacrifices. That's
effective altruism. Effective altruism.
Using effective altruism. There you go.
The idea is using evidence of reason to figure out how to benefit others as much as possible and taking action on that basis. Well, there's no end result because it's always about future possibilities. Always ad ignorantium fallacies, all sorts of things. So the fact that I'm hearing this sort of being recapitulated in a different form, but similar, is very disconcerting. This continual sort of like paradigms from the Jeremy Bentham school of consequentialism. So,
yeah. All right. So let's go ahead and continue with the Timcast clip because there's another half of it yet. And it's going to get heavier because you're going to talk about tunnels and all sorts of other tropes that might not be what they're presented as.
Europe. So it's a similar kind of thing. Like, but again, it's not that they just started the war. It's that they didn't fight it. They were like, okay, we attacked. Now we're going to hide and then wait for the media to say, look at how bad you are at finding us.
And the other point I would make is that we've tried it your way. Israel's tried it your way for decades, and they got October 7th. So that way doesn't work because you cannot do business with savages. And that's what Hamas is. I'm not talking about Gazans. I'm not talking about...
That'll be quick. That was question begging epithet savages, really? So they're no longer humans. They're just savages. And again, he's working on just so many neglected aspects historically.
The Arabs are always unreasonable, Tony. Every time Israel has made a generous offering of here's 10% of your stolen goods back. Here's 30% of your stolen goods back. Right. Can we give you all the stolen goods back? No fucking way is there a one state for you. But we'll consider one state for us that you take 0% of your goods back. Right. So is it unreasonable that
oh, that's a brilliant point, Rich. They're building straw men based on they're literally building like I'm saying, but the Zionists are. So the Zionists throughout the decades have been building straw men like, no, look at how reasonable we're being, looking how unreasonable. Of course, this is precipitated or exacerbated by what happened in 9/11. So we've also, when and in America, separate but confounding situations in a sense with the way they build up an ideology of not trusting brown skinned people from the Middle East that may or may not be Islam or Muslim and may not practice the Islamic faith. They may be secular. They may be all sorts of things. Plus,
it might also be the reason that the Daily Wire doesn't want to work with PBD or Candace because their skin's darker than the people making the rules over there.
It's interesting that Ben Shapiro has that white tone. I mean, it's as if his family comes from maybe Eastern Europe rather than like the Semitic tribes, but he's arguing from a sort of tribe of Shem, which is a mythology, by the way.
I'm sure he's from Portugal, bro.
Historical or biblical, not historical, biblical determinism, but continue forward.
Yeah, we're going to see a case of Europeanism acting like it owns Israel in a couple minutes, but we have to get through this guy's clip first.
Do business with savages. And that's what Hamas is. I'm not talking about Gazans. I'm not talking about Arabs. Hamas is savages, and they need to be exterminated because if you don't exterminate them, it's going to happen again.
So you're saying the two-party solution? Was that when you said the vision I'm looking for? Is that like a two-party solution?
No, when you say...
like the two-state solution?
Two-state solution.
No, not the two-state solution, but the idea that, we got to back off or do a ceasefire or worrying about, or what you said about worrying about it creating hate. Israel has done everything. They removed themselves from Gaza in 2005. They gave the Gazans incredible land, that they could have turned
It's
into.
incredible. Pause that
wait,
shit.
Stop. Yeah.
Pause it.
Whoa.
First
whoa,
off,
whoa. Yeah, go ahead.
You kidnapped everybody in Gaza and the West Bank when you took their land back in 1967, 1973, these types of times when you like, they were parts of other countries and you went and expanded and you're like, my border's here now. Now you're in my country. Now you're a prisoner. And so when he's like, we gave it back to them and they had a chance to build resorts, but they chose to build tunnels. Like he's about to drop some fucking 2,500-pound bombs of shit right here. Nothing against the gentleman, but the argument sucks and you could do better.
You're
And this
allowed to
information
you're
is
allowed to
easily
castigate.
available out there.
Yeah, you're allowed to. So, like, it's not a fallacy. It's not ad hominems to castigate an individual or criticize them as an individual in regard, as long as you're dealing with the arguments. We're clearly dealing with the arguments, and I have a lot of questions about this individual and his
Argumentative.
His
research
psychology,
style.
a little bit of his psychology.
Yeah, well, is there research behind the argument, or you just know these are strong talking points that no one ever says shit to, except Ian's trying to, but he doesn't have like 20 years of expertise on the topic to really hold his ground. And I wish, like, you know, times like that, I could get a little text, like when Kurt texts me and stuff, like, hey, we need, you know, you got something on this? Yes, there's plenty of history available to contradict these things, but Tim only deals with news, not history.
So let's just read this real quick
what do you got?
in regards to this Israel's disengagement from Gaza and North Samaria. And this is 2005. This is what he's arguing, that in 2005, they gave back a whole ton of land.
Great land. It was fabulous land. How would Trump say
Israeli missions around the world. That's the website. So about Israel, you can look it up. Anyways, it says Israel's plan of unilateral disengagement from the Gaza Strip and North Samaria, put forward by Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, was carried out on the 15th of August, 2005. The purpose of the plan was to improve Israel's security and international status in the absence of peace negotiations with the Palestinians. Oh, there's a little bit of a pragmatic reason as to why they did this. Not because they're just good-hearted. The Israelis are so, you know, they have such humble and
we took your house,
scrupulous
silverware
dispositions. Back. Yeah, right. Yeah. And how much did they give back? We're getting to that. And the purpose of the plan was to improve Israel's security and international status, but in order to not have to deal with peace negotiations with the Palestinians. So this is a pragmatic, strategic standpoint. With the implementation of the plan, IDF installations and forces were removed, and over 9,000 Israeli citizens living in 25 settlements were evicted. By 22nd September 2005, Israel's withdrawal from the entire Gaza Strip in the 1967 Green Line and the eviction of the 4 settlements in Samaria was completed. So there's 4 settlements in Samaria. In June 2007, Hamas took over the Gaza Strip from the Palestinian Authority. That was the same Hamas
after Arafat died,
supported by the Likud party. And that literally Benjamin Netanyahu admitted to such.
From the river to the sea.
Many thousands of rockets and mortar shells have been fired from the Gaza Strip onto southern Israeli towns and villages, terrorizing and destabilizing. So this is the dialectic they need to create in order to justify what they're doing now. So does one not see the strategic implications? Like, this isn't because there are such scrupulous individuals on the Zionist side, because they felt so bad for what they did. Yeah, they gave back a little land, but they did so with the anticipation of compromised security when it comes to Hamas, helping to prop up Hamas, and now getting the justification to do a complete wipe of the Gaza Strip. I mean, this had nothing to do with them being humble or moral actors in any capacity.
So if I could just
they're admitting this on the fucking
yes, of course,
embassy. This is embassies.gov.il. So there you go, Israeli embassy.
So Israel was in a situation with Palestinians. They had taken over. They were being held hostage, and they couldn't manage the PLO. The liberation part of the PO, Palestinian Authority, it used to be Palestinian Liberation Organization. Yasser Arafat was too secular, too hard to handle, so they got rid of him. They found out later he was assassinated with polonium, likely by Israel. Israel then puts in Hamas, who it supported, which would be a real religious-oriented group with militarization that they could easily use as justification to attack, much as the United States and Britain cultivated Al-Qaeda and ISIS and all these other flavors that have been out there. So there's a long history to these military techniques that are unfolding, and this is not in a vacuum, any of these types of studies. They don't start on 10/7 and they don't end
Right.
on today's news.
That's right. Now, what I'm confused about is this, I could be very wrong with this. The West Bank, including East Jerusalem and Gaza Strip, are considered occupied Palestinian territories by the United Nations. Yet, where was the part that they pulled out of? Like, I'm trying to find map of Israel and the Golan Heights or the Judea and Samaria area. Israel occupied West Bank, excluding East Jerusalem, highlighted in peach. So this is the supposedly the area that
Yeah, it's
they evacuated.
Judea and Samaria.
That, or in 2005 that they gave back the land, but there's so many settlements. That's basically the West Bank
the
area.
settlements, Tony. I guess they didn't totally leave that land then.
Well, they took about 4 settlements and 9,000 Israelis, but since then, how many more settlements? I mean, this is a joke.
It's exponential.
This guy,
like
I could be wrong
22,000.
here. I could be missing something. So I'm just going to say it seems like just a preliminary research that took me like 2 minutes to look up. This is more the West Bank area, not associated necessarily with the western edge where the Gaza Strip is. And this is what's being referred to as the land they gave back, which we know we've played more than many clips now showcasing that is not the actual truth of what's going on. In fact, there's
colonization going on.
Wow, man.
And that's Palestinian Authority territory. That Hamas has nothing to do with the West Bank. So when Israel's taking action, military action right now in the West Bank, and people are like, that's because of Hamas. No, Hamas has nothing to do with that. You don't understand the geopolitics of the situation. They're just trying to colonize that real quick while they're doing this other ethnic cleansing over here. And they're hoping that public opinion won't turn before they get it all done. But it seems to have, like, maybe there's 1 million people squashed into Rafah, which is usually a city of 250,000.
Here it is.
It's 1.5 million, I think, refugees at this point. But if they're not going to go in with brigades of people and kill them all bombing style, that'd be great, because those people are already starving. And I mean, I guess it would maybe put them out of their misery, but that's not the way to do it. You should give them healthy food and revive them and bring them back and give them full rights. Let them vote. Let them have security of their own. That'd be wonderful. You could treat them like human beings and not animals.
Right. Yeah, I'm trying. It says here in 2005, 21 Israeli settlements in the Gaza Strip. Oh, so it was in Gaza, not in the West Bank. So that's okay. I wanted to make sure I'm not confusing myself there. So that must have been a different situation. Were unilaterally dismantled and Israeli settlers and army evacuated from inside the Gaza Strip, redeploying the military along the border.
So they took the prison guards out of the prison and they put them on the outside of the prison, and they're like, all you prison people will just rule yourselves now, and we're going to bring in this militant organization to make sure you do, and we're not going to give you a second election. So when they say the Palestinians elected Hamas, when was the second election? They never had a second election. That's not an elected government. That's a farce that's supported by a nation state that uses it as a proxy force, and the guy who's on there, whoever, should know better, because he writes for Breitbart.
So they're saying they're giving back land, but the land is still fundamentally occupied. So they gave, like, they just, all they did was back up to your point. They took the military force and put the defense forces on the border, particularly on what would be, I guess, the southern border in the Gaza Strip. So, or this
it's a lot cheaper
northern
if you put
border
the prison guards on the
of
outside.
Gaza, southern border of Israel, of the actual Israeli territory that is not Palestinian. In the modern lines. So it says here the disengagement was proposed in 2003 by Prime Minister Ariel Sharon, adopted by the government in June 2004, and approved by the Knesset in February 2005 as the Disengagement Plan Implementation Law. It was implemented in August 2005 and completed in September 2005. The settlers who refused to accept government compensation packages and voluntarily vacate their homes prior to the August 15, 2005 deadline were evicted by Israeli security forces over a period of several days. The eviction of all residents, demolition of the residential buildings, and evacuation of associated security personnel from the Gaza Strip was completed by September 12, 2005. The eviction and dismantlement of the 4 settlements in the northern West Bank. Whoa, wait, no, I was right then. This is so confusing, unless there's something wrong. Verification. The eviction and dismantlement of the 4 settlements in the northern West Bank was completed 10 days later. So there, okay. This is the United Nations, international human rights organizations, and many legal scholars regard the Gaza Strip to still be under military occupation by Israel, while Israel and other scholars dispute this. So this was exactly what this said. This was a strategic plan in order to then create a false dialectic by funding and promoting a militant organization to create the straw man needed in order to give them the justification now and later on to do these incursions, in this case now full-on genocide, into the Gaza Strip. So they acted as though they're being humanitarian and then said, look, you know what they did? They played the victim card. They played it, and they did it better than any. Look, we're the victims.
It's like the whole
here.
deck, bro. There's no evidence in the stack, and people are beginning to wonder.
Yeah, about a lot of things. But we'll get
All
to
right,
that.
so let's go ahead and let this clip play because there's more commentary to be had here. It's a juicy one.
If the Gazans incredible land that they could have turned into another Miami.
That was part of the plan. That was part of like the Jared Kushner
Right.
concept.
And what did
They
they
just
do?
didn't do it.
So they tried to do what you're
There's
suggesting.
an economic embargo,
and what they got
couldn't
was
build
October
up the
7th.
land.
But if they were given the opportunity to build a great city, but then they were under a blockade, like walled in and under a blockade.
They got billions of dollars. I mean, compared to them, the Gazans per
Billions of
capita get
dollars.
more money than Americans do. More money than
Go
any
ahead.
other.
Go ahead, pause it, man. Because like, I really empathized with Ian during these clips because it's like he's just saying what's obvious.
He didn't do a bad job. He was Socratic.
No. It's just like he's not as well armed in that situation as he could be. Like he's genuine and he's concerned. He's like, but what about this? And then you hear like the talking points come back out. And it's like talking points not exactly reflective of reality. Go ahead, rewind it like 10 seconds, LD.
Real quick too. There was one did the I'm looking up now, but the economic embargo. Palestine. So I want to look up when the economic embargo actually started. 2006, 2007, economic sanctions against the Palestinian National Authority.
It's
And that
disingenuous to be like that they could have just had free market activities there because it's like a prison situation and it's heavily guarded and it's not like the rest
Isn't
of the
it
country,
interesting? So he's
which is
arguing
why
that-
it's got fences.
They argued, so he's arguing they got billions of dollars to build up this infrastructure. But it says here a blockade has been imposed on the movement of goods and people in and out of the Gaza Strip following Hamas's takeover in 2007. So they had a 2-year period to build it up. I think this is all
How
part of
convenient,
the
BB.
all part of the plan of building up the boogeyman in order to act like the victims.
Likud party plan of making these people move. It's like in America, they would have like a rough gang move in and everyone would want to move out of town. And then the real estate people come in and buy up the whole town and then they drill the oil. But that's what's going on in Israel. I just made it so that you could find it more palatable as an idea by using that metaphor. But that's the situation.
It's
So,
like hostile takeovers. It's Wall Street, the original film.
It's like a shell game. And I'm
Mhm.
not talking about the oil company. All right, let's continue to play it, but it's going to get a little bit more disingenuous as we go on. Like America gives billions of dollars to Israel, but they do give a few $1 million to Palestinians. That's true.
Yeah, I don't
That's
even
need
need to look up that claim. He said
He's going to,
billions
they're going
went
to,
to
but
Palestinians.
these facts are unchallenged on that format though. No one's looking anything up. Like they're treating it like, yeah, of course. Yeah. That was, Jared Kushner's plan to make, resort hotels and stuff like that. Why didn't these people think of that? Oh, they use their money to dig tunnels. We'll get to that. As soon as he says it, we're going to pause because that's not what's going on necessarily either. So let's go to the next part.
In and under a blockade.
They got billions of dollars. I mean, compared to them, the Gazans per capita get more money than Americans do. More money than any other aid people in the world.
But they were being blockaded.
Laws. Yeah,
I don't know.
I'll be over really quick. It says here, though, according to international aid to Palestinians, I'm looking at 2000 to 2006, which is the time frame he's alluding to. The second Intifada led to one of the deepest recessions in the Palestinian economy. Excuse me. The second Intifada led to one of the deepest recessions the Palestinian economy experienced in modern history. In those 2 years, Palestinian real GDP per capita shrunk by almost 40%. Okay, so let's look here. Yasser Arafat's death in 2004 and Israel's unilateral disengagement from Gaza created new hopes to the donor community. In March 2005, the Quartet of the Middle East underscored the importance of development assistance and urged the international donors community to support a Palestinian institution building without, however, ignoring budgetary support. The quartet also urged Israel and the PNA to fulfill their commitments arising from the Roadmap for Peace and the international community to revive and energize current donor coordination structures in order to increase their effectiveness. The international community's attempt in late 2005 to promote Palestinian economic recovery reflected a long-standing assumption that economic development is crucial to the peace, so forth. Yep. Although a mild positive growth returned in 2003 and 2005, this fragile recovery stalled as a result of the segmentation of the Gaza Strip, the stiff restrictions on on movements of goods and people across the borders with Israel and Egypt, and the completion of the Israeli West Bank barrier.
Mm-hmm.
As the World Bank stressed in December 2005, growth will not persist without good Palestinian governance, sound economic management, and continued relaxation of closure of GOI. And just go back to this. What was the point of the 2005 engagement? Again, it was Israel's withdrawal from the entire Gaza Strip to the 1967 Green Line and the eviction of the 4 settlements in Samaria was completed. The purpose of the plan was to improve Israel's security and international status, but they didn't want to have to negotiate peace with the Palestinians. Wow.
No, because the only way you're going to get peace is to give some a large chunk of their land back. They
So
might
one
not.
was-
They might not need it all at this point, but they might want a large chunk, larger than you've offered so far.
And if people are going to criticize using Wikipedia, this is actually, look at the references. This is according to the World Bank, quote, the incompatibility of GOI's continuous movement proposal and with donor and PA funding criteria allied with GOI's commitment to protecting access to Israeli settlements translate to a continuing high level of restriction on Palestinian movement throughout much of the West Bank, archived by the World Bank, which is not necessarily a reputable organization, but certainly they do
Started
keep
by
interesting facts.
Nazi funders. All right, let's get back
Interesting.
to the idea
So he doesn't-
exterminator.
So he lied again, like he didn't, or he didnn't know. Maybe he was nescient. You know,
Maybe he
I
doesn't
don't know.
care. I don't know. I don't
Maybe
need
he's
to
being
make judgments about the man. I need to make judgments about the veracity of the argument being, offered there. So let's go back to the idea exterminator.
Know exactly what was being blockaded, but they were able to build an awful lot of stuff there, including incredible tunnels. And why,
I mean,
if they can build a tunnel, why can't they build a resort?
Hamas posted
Stop.
the video of
We have shown on this podcast many, many times since 10/7 that it is the history and fact of the matter on record that Israel built tunnels under places like their hospitals during the 1980s war with Lebanon. And so it's not that Hamas builds all these tunnels. It's like they're probably using what Israel
And-
built and left behind. If you
Yeah,
build a
ex-
command center under a place, I'm pretty sure they're going to use it. And then Israel can say they're using human shields by having a command center under the hospital.
Strong,
But
man,
unless you're
yeah.
going to show me like Hamas built that, like I haven't seen a whole lot of receipts on this tunnel rat stuff you guys talked about 6 months ago. You kind of put it on the back burner and didn't talk about it anymore. But all that stuff that was going on hasn't really come to fruition. There was like a lot of stories at 10/7 that have not come to fruition with the evidence, and we could go into them because we have. That's what this show does over the past 6 months.
And it says here, real quick, to your point, like what money? So here, it says here, 2006 to 2007, Hamas comes into play. Reading from the same article about international aid to the Palestinians. So I read 2000 to 2006. What happened? Now it says on here, on 25th January 2006, the Islamist organization Hamas, which is considered by the main donor countries to be a terrorist organization, won the Palestinian legislative elections, which we know was actually supported by the Likud party in particular, and formed government on March 29th or 29th of March 2006 without accepting the terms and conditions set by the quartet, which was mentioned above. This resulted in the imposition of economic sanctions against the Palestinian National Authority, including near cessation of direct relations and aid between most bilateral donors and the PA. So what, to your point, Rich, what money did they get to build the tunnels? Like what? I'm asking for a friend with only
You should
some
ask for a friend.
multilateral
Dangerous questions, man.
agencies and a few donors continuing direct contact in project administration. The quartet's decision was criticized by the quartet's former envoy, James Wolfenson.
Yeah, from the World
Wolfensohn,
Bank.
who characterized it, quote, a misguided attempt to starve the Hamas-led Palestinians into submission, end quote, and the UN's Middle East former envoy, Alvaro de Soto. Wow.
I got Jimmy Wolfenson right here.
Wow.
He worked for Momo Strong.
Oh, he's a Momo. Oh,
Yep,
God.
part of what you would call
crazy.
the agenda
Yeah, the
if you
agenda.
will. That precipitates down to you as climate change or global warming was designed back in the 70s and 80s. But again, we covered that in a past episode.
we've
no
gone
time
over
for
that.
that. We got to get back to the guy who thinks he can kill the Hamas idea with dropping 2,500-pound bombs on families in some sort of where's daddy lavender kind of associated targeting, murdering of civilians type
Real
of scenario.
quick, Rich.
Yeah.
I know we don't have a lot of time, but I'm just going to say this. Like, this is really frustrating to listen to. I thought, first of all, Ian did a really good job of asking questions. He's doing the Socratic
Yes.
method, but what needed to happen is he needed to ask questions on every single thing they were saying.
Yeah,
Like,
and
he needed to literally
demand some
question
evidence.
everything, because like they're making these broad brush strokes that these things happen and this is why it is. But man, you're not really. These are very generalized points about it. Like what specifics do you have? Like, give me an example. Okay, you made their point. Give me now an example of how that money went to building tunnels.
Help me understand is the phrase, Ian. If you're watching this, the phrase is, can you help me understand how you came to this conclusion step by step?
Man. And all
just
the
show
other
me
points.
the evidence along the way so I can understand your position. It's a very gentle question. It's used in problem solving all the time. So it's not a malicious thing and it's not something you're taking advantage of the guy. No, you just simply understand, like trying to figure out like what did he pick up that you didn't, or what has he picked up that you won't accept as evidence or knowledge? Because those are the 2 points of contention. And if you can get to that through the conversation, you can practice intellectual self-defense on a regular basis instead of that place where it looks kind of like a struggle session. Like if you don't agree with his position, bro, then you're off the team, it looks like, because everyone else knows without looking or thinking, because that's kind of like a non-player character perspective. Like they're not expanding their knowledge and going and asking questions and finding answers. They're like, here is the predetermined thing. You must say this.
So you can see how much of a straw man they built up. Listen to this. The quartet on the Middle East or Middle East Quartet, sometimes called the Diplomatic Quartet or Madrid Quartet or simply the Quartet, is a foursome of nations and international and supranational entities involved in mediating the Israeli-Palestinian peace process. The quartet comprises the United Nations, the United States, the European Union, and Russia. I'm done. I mean,
that's right, because this is a show about supranational politics, and it's perfect that everything's coming together. Let's now go back to the gentleman who wants to assassinate the idea of Hamas, because you're not going to bomb it away, bro. It's not even all in Palestine. You have to go, like they should have just, I said, right, as soon as it happened, the leaders are in Qatar, leave the civilians out of it. For 6 months, Israel has not listened to Grand Theft World for some reason. I don't know why. We keep giving them good information, like, don't make it worse, man. Don't dig it deeper. But they keep doubling down, and we have to sadly report such things because I don't see like Israel's downfall as being America's upswing in any way. I see us as strategic allies in the war against terrorism and stuff. So we got to make sure that good things are happening over there, and good things are not happening with Bibi driving everything not so legally, let's say that way. There was no diplomacy. 10-7 was a cry for help from the prisoners who broke through the fences. There was no saying, hey, maybe you guys have a legit grievance. We should sit down and talk about this. Sorry about that. Don't kill any more of our people, please.
Hey, this is consistent with patterns in the past. That's right. That's right. Let me just point this out again. What was the point of the disengagement? Again, it was so they didn't have to do peace negotiations with the Palestinians in 2005. Instead of quote unquote to improve, you want to talk about doublespeak, to improve Israel's security and international status in the absence of peace negotiations with the Palestinians, which then right after that, 2006, Hamas gets elected. Well, I mean, the coincidences are so overwhelming. And then they have the Madrid Quartet who's like, look, fund them. Oh, we got to pull the funding because Hamas, they're a terrorist organization, so they don't get any funding. We got to impose an economic embargo after they said fund them. The inversion of reality.
But they could have built hotels, Tony. That's what he wanted you to understand. But they built tunnels instead.
This is insane.
It's like they could have bought food for their kids, but they bought big screen TVs.
Dude, Rich, we literally didn't, like, this is not, it's not like we're going deep research here. We're not going even into the books. Bro. We're not going into the stacks. Like, my God, they didn't even try at all.
No.
Like these people, they've heard the Hasbara version, the propagandistic version from the Zionist side of how events happen. And then they just went with that, saying that must be the facts.
Yeah. Go ahead, let them play a little bit more, and then we'll play Gideon's trumpet.
Incredible tunnels. And why, if they can build a tunnel, why can't they build a resort?
Hamas posted the video of turning water pipes into rockets.
Yeah, they did.
Whether they actually were doing that or it was propaganda, that was their propaganda.
Okay, so let's say that Hamas was turning water pipes into rockets. Do you know why they're doing that? Because that's some prison shiv type of situation.
That's true.
You don't have Raytheon and Northrop Grumman and Lockheed Martin and Big Daddy America behind you, providing you with the latest and greatest weapons. You got to make some shit out of fermented whatever and some other stuff, whatever, that's like 200-year-old technology, and you have no directional control or anything over that. So of course it goes off unintentionally and doesn't hit targets, and it's very unsafe munition, but that's all you have because you're in the prison having to make your own type of stuff without a 3D printer type of stuff. You got no ghost gunner. You got, some manual or something that the U.S. Army once left behind from its proxies teaching type things like that.
Much agreed. Much agreed. Now I'm wondering, like, what is, Tim pulled this as brilliant way of trying to feign as though he's like independent.
He's in on it,
and
like he
neutral.
understands
But I'm starting to wonder.
guerrilla
I mean,
warfare.
yeah, I mean, like,
He's a military strategist. He's all up on Clausewitz and Sun Tzu. And
oh yeah,
Machiavelli's Art of War is another
of
good one. It's different than Sun Tzu's Art of War or Miyamoto
Clausewitz
Musashi.
von Clausewitz had an interesting one where he actually towards the end of the book, you pointed out to me where he argues for the systematic use of the Kabbalah as a mental framework by which to strategize military campaigns. Very fascinating.
He's taking tips.
Yeah, that's the fact that the Kabbalah was referenced by von Clausewitz and that would have been 19th
on
century.
war. Yeah.
On war, correct.
Yeah, it was like 1820s, I think he published that. And yeah, that's history. So military history does include guerrilla warfare of the indigenous party. Like, look at how the Vietnamese fought the Americans. They had stuff they were making out of hardware stuff too, right? They'll make some pipe bombs, they'll dig some tunnels, right? And that's what people are trying to evoke in this Hasbara, that it's like, oh, they equate, right? So people know about Vietnam and the tunnel warfare and the guerrilla warfare and these sort of things. So they apply that to Hamas when all that evidence might not be there, bro.
Or Al Qaeda.
You can't just say, like, you as an American picture, Hamas has these tunnels and there's these rooms and they got hundreds of captives and all this stuff. It's like a lot of those people were probably killed friendly fire the day one. And they're like, what can we use this for? They're like, well, we can let people think they got taken hostage.
Yeah, that's a fair theory. That's a totally fair. Yeah, we don't. That's a good point, Rich. That is totally based on the or lack there of evidence. We don't. It's just as reasonable to assume, like, how many of them are really hostages juxtaposed to how many of them are actually killed and not identified because of the severity, because of the what was the Hannibal directive, right?
Yes,
the Hannibal directive was
different than the Samson. You got to keep Hannibal and Samson separate. They'll fight.
Now we're going to the back of the.
We're going to those clips soon. We're going to those clips soon. All right, but first we got to go back to the Timcast because they're not done teaching us yet, and everything we're showing you is minutes 8 through 18 of a 3-hour podcast. So we're just giving you a little taste here.
Don't tell me they went 3 hours with these guys.
I didn't watch any further.
Oh man, I hope they didn't.
As soon as he said the thing at 18 minutes, I was like, I'm done. I'm out. I'm all set. Let's go ahead and play it.
Yeah, they did.
Whether they actually were doing that or it was propaganda, that was their propaganda. Where they were like, look at these water pipes they gave us.
In that situation, you know, you have no money. If you feel like you're being annihilated, you just use your basic weapons. You know, whatever.
No one was annihilated. No one's in there. No one's bothering them. If Gaza and Hamas disarmed tomorrow, there would be peace. If Israel disarmed tomorrow, Gaza would exterminate them within 2 weeks.
What if everybody was armed?
I'm seeing that the UN.
Whoa, pause.
I like Ian's point. Let's outfit both sides and let them play on the field if you're going to call it a war. Because when only one side has the equipment to play the game, it's called a massacre. Okay? And I just need you to rewind it 5 seconds so we can hear the assertion he made right before Ian came in with, like, why don't you arm everybody?
There would be
roll
peace.
it again. Yeah, there would be.
If Israel disarmed tomorrow, Gaza would exterminate them within 2 weeks.
What if everybody was armed?
I'm seeing
and
that
I'd ask, like, what evidence? What evidence do you have that Gaza would exterminate the rest of Israel in 2 weeks? I'm not saying it wouldn't happen because those people are 80 years mad, bro. So I understand that. But you see, if they disarmed, nothing would happen to them. You have not read the founders of Zionism. You have not followed Israeli history for the past 80 years because every step of the way, it's about how do we exterminate or genocide these people within the bounds of public opinion not turning on us. And they have reached the point this past week with the world's central kitchen. I got it right. That type of assassination from above over a series of minutes where there had to be a drone operator saying, look, there's survivors and let's hit them too. These types of war crimes are not going to be, you just diddied yourself in this whole situation.
Yeah. Look at what
everyone wants away from you now because of the Diddy situation. Like, nobody wants to deal with Diddy. Is it the same type of thing going on?
Everyone's starting to distance from themselves. I just have to bring this up.
Argumentum
my first thought
is
there's a false dichotomy here, which is the broader term would be false dichotomy, but he's arguing from ignorance, in which case it asserts that a proposition is true because it has not yet been proven false, where a proposition is false because it has not yet been proven true. It represents a type of false dichotomy in that it excludes the possibility that there may have been an insufficient investigation to prove that the proposition is either true or false. Do we know for sure that Hamas is going to, if every in this hypothetical situation, that if Israel were to disarm, that they would just go and kill all? Look, it's reasonable.
Devil's advocate, I would cite, if I had to play the other side, I would cite the 1988 Hamas charter where it says that they would like to do stuff like that. But they've, now, if I wanted to play the other side, I would say they updated it in 2018 because what they said as Jews in 1988, they now recognize is Zionism, a specific political ideology, and not really
not representative of all of Judaism.
Exactly.
Not representative of all.
They became more nuanced and detailed, but people on the Zionist side don't want to recognize that. They want to hold them to the standards of 1988, almost as if they would just like to complete the same thing, but opposite, which is what they say in the 1977 Likud Charter. They already stated politically they would like river to the sea with no Palestinians.
Yeah. Okay, that's point. Yeah, right. So that's continuing the argument for me.
They made the move first.
He's saying if the Israel, let's do the other side now. Let's continue this logic from the other side. Now, if Israel were to, or if Hamas were to be disarmed, well, they mainly are disarmed. There's not much left. And we're seeing the continual belligerent actions, wanton actions of the Israeli IDF forces. And so, in other words, there's almost no resistance at all. They're indiscriminately genociding all of the Palestinians. They're not choosing Hamas. They're not discriminating. They're indiscriminate in this capacity. They're choosing everyone. They're forcing all the whole way back to Rafah, the very, very, very southern, the last southern border town, basically. It's like almost a border town. The exit, right? That's curious. So in other words, he's ad ignorantium creating a false dichotomy on the side of Hamas, saying Hamas would kill them all. On the other side, he's acting as though in this hypothetical scenario, that's really not as hypothetical. That Israel is actually doing that, and Hamas is mostly disarmed at this point, and they're continuing to commit these indiscriminate war crimes and that constitute genocide, which is why there was an ICJ ruling about this. That the conditions are there. The conditions are there that genocide is possibly taking place, now needs to be investigated. That was sort of the conclusion of those rulings, that there's at least enough circumstantial evidence to say, yeah, it's very possible the genocide is actually ongoing, meaning there's not really an armed resistance. So he's acting as though Hamas, what? And that built a straw man. You can see the cascade of fallacies that is spewing from this man's mouth that is actually his asshole. Sorry.
Well, I mean, that sounds a little personal, but I would observe objectively
shots at
that
this point by
on 10/7, it was a big deal. Yeah, on 10/7, it was a big deal for the Palestinians to have access to flight. Like they got some Alibaba glider, wind turbine thing, whatever, ultralights. They don't have F-22s. They don't have F-35s. They don't have F-16s. They don't have any ordnance. They had some things that took flight. They had some drones. They had some mopeds. They had some AK-47s. They had some rocket launchers. They had no tanks, and they didn't even have time or the means to make a killdozer that really could have done a lot of damage and kept driving on, right? None of that type of stuff. The convenient friendly fire that happens as all those civilians are partying next to the prison gates. First off, why are you partying next to a prison and antagonizing the prisoners with all your expression of freedom? I don't know. And how Israel's government let that go on when they knew Operation Jericho Wall had scheduled this type of operation, and why there's a fence in their own country is going back to the apartheid part of that country.
Why would they support Hamas in the first place? You're right, Rich. But let's take it back to history. Because why would they support this sort of militant organization when in fact they continue to exclaim and exhort to their proselytizing to the Zionist cohort that they want peace with the Palestinians and trying to build that image internationally? They want peace, but the other side doesn't. Yet they support the most militant representation of that side after the very strong likelihood that they killed the PLO leader that I'm skimming on his name
Yasser Arafat.
Yasser Arafat, right?
With polonium. According to Reuters in 2014, but they'll censor it for you.
More secular and willing to admit, or willing to, I think, I could be wrong in this, but I think at one point willing to state that Israel is a country, which is a big thing for the Arab resistance, is that Israel was not, we will never admit that they are a country. There's no manifest destiny there. I think they were willing, PLO was willing to concede that point. I could be wrong, so I'll need to research that again, but I think, they're obviously is much more willing to work towards peace in that regard. My God. I mean, why support then the worst element of what you're trying to say? You're doing the opposite of, which is
Well, it's like when you get too close to peace and it's not in their grand manifest destiny agenda, they're going to either pull out or pull back or blame you or have a terrorist attack. That's the whole history.
yeah, oh yeah,
And that's an objective
false flags.
meta view on it, because that's what continues to happen throughout that. So
That's right.
if Yasser Arafat and Bill Clinton and these guys get together and they're
The
having
Oslo Accords.
they're going to cut a deal and it's going to be a two-state solution, like, to the real Zionists, to the people who put Bibi in power and empowered
Right.
the Likud party, like, that's a no-go.
Yeah.
Full stop. Read all the founding Zionists. They say, we know we're going to have to drive them from this country. We know we're going to have to do all this. Like, they knew they were moving from Europe into a place that had people, and they would have to deal with those people, and the people wouldn't be happy that they were moving there.
And the straw man they created was really, it's really a type of false flag. It was just the manifestation of creating the conditions for the false flags that they needed to in order to create the straw man arguments to justify their need to do frequent incursions over the 2010s into the Gaza Strip, now culminating tragically into what will be possibly the final incursion in regards to be the full militaristic might of the IDF forces and the genocide currently taking place, and the complete demolishing and dismantling of all infrastructure. There's nothing left for the most part in the Gaza Strip.
If more people knew what I know and you know about intellectual self-defense and how to stand your ground and challenge these bad ideas, there'd be a lot less frivolous death and genocide and ethnic cleansing able to be done on this planet. So it's like, you can't fight them over there. You can fight them between your ears, make yourself less inhabitable by their inaccurate statements. You're going to be able to say, whoa, help me understand, bro. How did you just come to that conclusion right there that you think this will happen, but not the other way around? Because I'm not saying you're wrong, but I'm saying you're wrong on this other side. Like, if you think that the Palestinians would go kill all the Jews, there's an equal and opposite argument just as good on the other side by the people who already live there and aren't the people who broke in and stole all the stuff.
But that's why it always goes to feelings. You know, unfortunately, people fall back into their feelings. They fall back into their emotions, which is why we have a predilection or penchant for really religious or ideological thinking. And then that capacity, it's not like the Zionists are ever going to give up their position. They're just going to find a way to reorient their arguments, to give them the justifications they need, because they're not, and that's sad, because they're falling back on their feelings. They want to identify as this for some unknown reason because of the Hasbara, maybe at an early age. I mean, we played a clip actually of a number, I can call them the survivors of Zionists, in a way, those that have broken ranks with understand that they may be a Jew, but that doesn't make them a Zionist. And it took them a very long time to be able to sort of go
untie
through
those knots of propaganda and Hasbara.
Yeah, you got it.
All right, let's get back to the Timcast clip, and we'll hopefully get it toward the crescendo here.
Within 2 weeks. If Israel disarmed tomorrow, Gaza would exterminate them within 2 weeks.
What if everybody was armed?
I'm seeing that the UN spent $600 million on Gaza in 2020.
Well, how much? 600 million?
600 million, and just in 2020 alone, and gave 4.5 billion between 2014 and 2020.
I've asked a lot of people about,
and that's just the UN.
Like, what would happen, and usually when I ask, like, what would happen if like Hamas surrendered, and they'd be like, the war's over, and I'd be like, and then what? Like, yeah, and Gaza goes on as it is, right. And I'm like, with the walls and everything, like, yeah, of course, and then whatever, they can do whatever they want. And then I said, okay, what would happen if Israel said, we're tearing the walls down, Palestinians have free reign to move in and around Israel, you're not all welcome? And I've never gotten a straight answer, because I think even the people who are critical of Israel, or even, as I would call it, Israel deranged, understand what happens if Israel takes the walls down and says, all of Gaza, please feel free to, you get October 7th.
Yeah.
There were a lot of the, like, I remember the October 7th, there were a lot of the workers who had passes to work in Israel were among those who were committing the atrocities on that day. So they had, already had access to Israel, and they were coming in to do that. It's kind of crazy.
I don't think that this, whatever this is, there's no easy answer. My position is typically the America First one, of just like, oh, I don't know about the moral questions here, man. I don't know why we're involved. And I know, I understand Ben Shapiro's argument about a U.S. ally in the region, the risks of rapid escalation if Israel goes, what do they call it, the Samson option, and how the U.S. needs to have a strong presence in controlling things to prevent the expansion into a massive World War III. And I'm just like, I understand that. My view more so is the U.S. is driving itself into World War III in a variety of different areas, particularly with Ukraine. I don't see how our involvement is improving anything.
Your concern about Ukraine, I share completely. But the Hamas's charter is wipe out Israel and then wipe out all the Jews, including American
They
Jews.
did change it. They took that part about wiping out the Jews
Just recently.
Just recently.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, I believe them. Well, I feel better then.
And this is the crazy thing. It's I believe it's in the Hadith that it's what's that
2018.
the line says, you know, the tree says there's a Jew hiding behind me or something. And that was in the Hamas charter only until recently. So my point is,
feel better.
Yeah, right, exactly. I don't believe it.
It was a PR move. It was a PR move, and I'm not accusing you.
Stop.
The Likud never took it out of their charter, though.
So
Huh,
there's also
that's
in
interesting.
28, like it actually, like there was, so this coincides to the 2018, 2019, they call it the Gaza border protest, but the March of Return. This was March 30th, 2018. Maybe they did a peaceful march up to the border wall, you know, and that was something Norman Finkelstein references more than many times. That's where the Israeli snipers, you know, discriminately targeted disadvantaged individuals like people in wheelchairs and, you know, children and all horrible sort of shooting eye sockets and shooting people in the knees and doing like just absolutely horrendous. And this is from UN reports and whatnot that he references more than we've showed a case on this show more than many times. But the 2018, 2019 Gaza border protest, now they're saying, you know, it's just propaganda. And maybe so, but but the point I'm trying to make is there's actual evidence that they seem to update at the same time that they had a peaceful march. That's curious. So maybe they're willing to be like, hey, we're going to do this peaceful thing and we're going to change our position to say not all Jews, but Zionists. And
Right.
that coincides with the peaceful. I mean, there's evidence to show that it's not just pure. It could be just propaganda. Maybe it was from the Hamas, from the leadership standpoint.
Yeah, it could be
But-
just to rile up extra.
But there's evidence
hostility.
to the contrary, though. There's evidence to the
Right.
contrary that is not necessarily the case.
But
And
we
so I
don't need
think-
to weigh that extra evidence because it's, you know,
And
predetermined, pre-cooked perspectives.
And since they looked this up, I decided to look it up too. And I want your opinion on this, Rich. So it says here, this is from December 20th, 2021.
Yeah.
It says here, Gaza City. International community has sent billions of dollars in aid to the Gaza Strip in recent years to provide relief to the more than 2 million Palestinians living in the isolated Hamas-ruled territory.
Yeah, because they're
Aid
not
is-
allowed to have an economy because they're in a prison. So if you want them to eat, like, let me just tell you something. Like in Morocco in the 60s, if you were in prison, your family had to come to the prison and feed you. They don't feed you at the prison. If someone doesn't come and give you aid, you will die right there. And that's part of their punishment system. And so this is kind of the same thing.
Right.
Palestinians are in prison. They're not allowed to feed themselves really and like make business and have free market. It's a very controlled, tight, locked up economy. And if they're going to get extra stuff, it comes in as charity. And then that can, you know, help to make sure that they're not going to get uppity and go challenging the plantation
Correct.
masters.
That's correct. And it says here, the aid is intended to ease the burden on civilians of an Israeli-Egyptian blockade imposed on Gaza when the Islamic militant group seized power from the rival Palestinian force in 2007. Israel says the heavy restrictions on trade and movement are needed to keep Hamas from enhancing its military capability, while critics view it as a form of collective punishment. Israel
You can't
and
let
Hamas-
the person you're going to fight in the boxing ring also train. You have
So
to
here's-
keep them weak and starved while you like roid up. I understand.
Here's the confusion I have. It says here, Israel closely supervises aid to ensure it bypasses Hamas, but the Hamas-run government benefits from foreign countries footing the bill for schools, hospitals, and infrastructure, allowing it to conserve its own resources, including the taxes and customs it collects. So it goes into here, you know, 600 billion in 2020 alone. UN agencies, more than 80% of the funding is channeled through UN's Agency for Palestinian Refugees. Some 280,000 children in Gaza, 10 schools run by UNRWA, which also provides health services and food aid. Qatar has provided 1.3 billion since 2012 for construction, health services, and agriculture, which includes 306. So what I'm confused about, okay, so let's say this money actually, which I'm not convinced, but let's say it actually ended up going into the Gaza Strip. They're saying it's going into the Gaza Strip for just for like humanitarian reasons, hospitals, schools, basic infrastructure of that nature. But yeah, at the same time, Israel is saying that there's a blockade set up. of what goes in. So what I'm confused about is I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say billions have indeed gone in,
Sure.
but it's being
And
conditioned.
Hamas reappropriates some of that stuff and keeps it for themselves and does untoward stuff with it while they let aid come in. Yeah, of course, they're corrupt government. What else is going on?
That's absolutely true. Most likely, absolutely. But what I'm confused about is it says Israel is controlling what's going in. So, like, in other words, it seems like Israel's whitewashing or making sure they approve, rather, not whitewash, but approve of the billions of dollars. What is going to so they're allowing. So in other words, they're constricting the flow on purpose. So the money's there. They're allowing it maybe to come in, but this is where I'm confused. If they're allowing it to come in and then arguing that, like, hospitals and media groups, like media companies there, like we showed how they bombed those civilian run media companies, and also like schools
2
and
years
hospitals.
Before 10/7. Yes.
Right. Schools and hospitals also are harboring Hamas terrorists, but you're the ones who allowed that money to go to the building of that particular infrastructure. And you're saying that you are controlling that in order to make sure it doesn't go to the Hamas terrorists. So in other words, you're then responsible for like.
But then they blew it up, so it doesn't matter. It's like a null set.
Oh man, this is just hard.
It's frustrating because it's not supposed to make sense, Tony. If it's irrational,
there's a lot of problems with this logic right now.
That's my point. It's not following. It's breaking all the rules of logic.
It only took us 2 hours to get through a 10-minute question.
He's heading for his coup de grace, his crescendo right here. He's going to say whose land was stolen.
Is it self coup de grace?
No. I wish him well.
That was the No, I mean, like, metaphorically speaking, with his own arguments, not literally.
That's what Destiny does. Or Shmuley, he digitally decapitates people. No, we don't do that. We're polite. We're civil human beings. Let's go to the rest of this clip.
In the Hamas charter only until recently. So my point is,
better.
Yeah, right, exactly. I don't believe it.
It was a PR move. It was a PR move, and I'm not accusing you of this, but it was a PR move so that someone could make the argument you just made. Why are we there? Why are we helping them? They're very good at PR.
And people have made that argument to me. They're like, no, that's not in the charter anymore. And I'm like, oh, come on.
So what I've heard is that the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization, which was Yasser Arafat's Palestinian government in the late 1900s or 1990s, up to relatively recently, that I heard that the Israelis were involved with breaking them apart because they controlled the West Bank and Gaza, and it made it look like they're really going to get a two-state solution. We don't want that. We want the territory. So let's create a new government. We'll call it Hamas that can rule over in Gaza while the PLO can have the West Bank. Now we have two disparate factions fighting each other, easy pickings, and they're villains, so that when they attack us, we can use it as a false flag.
Crosland's got the idea right there. That's tight.
He's close.
That's
he's
good.
Pretty close to it.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead. Let John Nolte talk now.
If someone stole my land, right? If someone came in and wiped out my family and stole my land, I would not sentence my descendants to generations of hate and despair and poverty. You move on.
In fact, most places in the world have done that.
Just stop.
That's exactly right. You move on. And
if someone stole my land,
hold on, real quick.
Did you hear what he just said? Right?
I want to see what did Tim?
Palestinians should just get over it for having their land stolen. That's what he just said.
I know that, but Tim said something too. Could just go back like 5 seconds real quick, LD, and play that. So,
land. I would not sentence my descendants to generations of hate and despair and poverty. You move on.
In fact, most places in the world have done that.
That's exactly right.
Oh, whoa. Most places in the world have done that. These broad brush generalizations. First of all, warfare, historically, like, most people are wiped out. You didn't have a choice. It's not like see, the problem, like, you're acting like these people had a choice.
Just move along. Man. Move on. Just move on.
Plus, isn't that the admission that therefore Israel came and took their land?
Now, you want to see the brilliance of, like, logic and reason and upstreaming and downstreaming? Okay, he just said stole land, generations, move on. Great. I'm going to believe you. Let's take that template and I apply it now 3,000 years ago on the timeline, or I apply it 50 years from now on the timeline. Do you want me to do that?
Oh, yeah, the Romans stole the land.
If the Canaanites and the Hittites and all the other ites that were fighting over the land back then, like, get over it then, bro. then you have no like calling for a holy land that's also Islamic and Christian holy ground
Yeah.
as
Church of the
exclusively
Holy
your own.
Sepulchres there, right? Yeah.
Christians could make a real cause to say, maybe it should be some sort of tripartite state,
Oh,
little Christian
100%.
state over there with the Muslims and the Jews.
Easy.
And we all share Jerusalem. How about them apples? Right. So like pushing the not truth on the public is getting people to take notice of these stories and to be like, wait a minute, that argument placed over here doesn't play so well for your predetermined ideological stance, instead of coming from it with curiosity, trying to understand, and then taking a position on what you presently understand given the evidence available.
That's so fun. You made a great point there. It's like if we were to take it at face value, the argument he's making, then
Yes.
at that standpoint, then the Jews
get
of
over
Europe particularly should have just gotten over it, and there should be no justice. There should have been no Zionism. But that's But
those
then
aren't
there's
our
another-
words. That's
That's
the
his.
reflection
But
of
then-
what he just said right there.
but
That's
then
just
he's
trying it
also
on different situations.
But then he's also tacitly admitting that
Stolen
There-
land.
or alluding to the possibility. I mean, he's I think presenting it in kind of a hypothetical, but he's alluding to like, if someone came and stole the land, well, okay, maybe that is a real possibility of what happened. Like that is, and like it's not so far removed. I mean, the Jews didn't get over
I
it
shot the
for
clerk.
thousands
Is
of
this
years.
Ralph Macchio and My Cousin Vinny? I shot the clerk. Is that what he's doing? Maybe not though.
Boy. This what and
All right.
wow, I don't even know what to say anymore.
You don't
That
have to say
guy-
anymore because we're done with that clip. Because
Yeah,
once
thank
it's like
God.
you should just get over it and you see, oh, that's your argument and it doesn't fit here, here, and here. So your argument's inconsistent and contradicts itself. All set. Thank you very
That
much.
is so problematic.
Good night.
Seeing that sort of rhetoric just greatly disheartens me.
Yeah.
But and that's how and there's no. I mean, Ian did a really good job. I
I
mean,
like this-
he can't
Yeah.
really do much considering. But Tim, I mean, come on, bro. I mean,
It's
some of the
outside his
very
expertise. It's not in current events. He's an expert in
Yeah.
current events. He's not an expert in history and reading all the books and knowing all the angles and all the other multiplicities of.
But doesn't
learning.
that impact current events? So therefore, aren't
does.
you a little bit ignorant on then how current events are unfolding?
Well,
And
that's
yet
where
you
I
call-
see Ian could really grow into. Like he just read a book
Wow.
on these topics and like be able to add that element, and that's kind of what I'm hoping. A little intellectual self-defense demonstrated with little historiography.
historiography, history. Yeah.
Yeah, historyography. Graphy, writing about the history. Books talked about in this episode, but we're not necessarily dug out of the stack in time to be timely tonight. Biggest Prison on Earth, Elon Pappy, Palestine and Israeli School Books by Nurit Pelaid Elhanan. Part of our title tonight, Chutzpah, comes from Norman Finkelstein, The Unspoken Alliance. This is the reference I said, South Africa getting nukes from Israel. This is the book for that. Going back to the guy on Timcast, you might want to read a little Elon Pappy, 10 minutes about Israel. The use of AI in Palestine. We've talked about this book on the show before, but it's worth mentioning again, the Palestine Laboratory. Tony mentioned this one just a couple minutes ago. It's The Holocaust Industry by Norman G. Finkelstein. He also mentioned the transfer agreement for Edwin Black, for which he got disowned for. We also mentioned earlier tonight about the Zionists working with the Nazis. This would be the book for that. And for people counting numbers up, there's The 7th Million, The Israelis and the Holocaust by Tom Segev, a highly studiously referenced book. You got to weigh it on the scale with the claims on the other side, as Tony showed you both sites that he uses for such adjudications and delegations. It's not like you're placing bets at Vegas. There's not an outcome tomorrow. It's an ongoing topic. So learn a little bit. It's not going to stop anytime soon. You don't have to like cram all that stuff at once, but if you want to understand what's not easily being purveyed, it's what's most valuable and hidden from you to give you understanding, then check out some of these books. What makes the Grand Theft World podcast unique, invigorating, exciting, and informative? Most other podcasts out there are either doing straight up interviews or they're just covering the daily news. They're covering current events from the day they happened. And that is effective. It's useful. It's a great starting point. And then sometimes these current events change during the week past the first story. So we like to give it a little time. You have to wait till some of the dust settles on these stories in order to give them accurate coverage. And the other thing that's really missing in the media landscape is covering the articles that are coming out every day. That's great. That's necessary. But who's bringing in contextual history so that you can understand what has been going on for decades and decades to lead up to the machinations and actions that we see unfolding today? So what we do here on the podcast is we cover current events. Many of these things are censored, but we wait about a week. As a forensic historian, I focused mainly through my career on the history of globalism and collectivism and things that they call maybe the New World Order. There's a lot of facts to these sort of circumstances, groups, events, activities, working groups that they've had over time. So for Grand Theft World listeners, we not only break down the current events, most of which that are censored during the week, we provide you with contextual history, we give you the source notes, the references, we do deep dives, and this really empowers you with an understanding of context and history so that you can make more informed decisions in your life. There's also a community, a membership where you guys can actually ask questions and we can get into the show and we can share evidence. And there's a town hall weekly for Grand Theft World for those who listen to it and are interested in covering the stories that we don't get to during a 6-hour show. Listening to it an hour a day, you could easily consume the week's news, but you're going to have substance and meaning and context and understanding. And with that, you can make higher quality decisions in your life. So if you're interested in more quality in your life, go to grandtheftworld.com, click podcast at the top, and we'll see you there. Thank you.
These allegations are false.
This isn't Grand Theft Auto, folks. This isn't a video game.
What are the most surprising things that you discovered once you started pulling on that thread? Who he was connected to, what institutions he was influential over, what events he participated in?
Come on, man. What are we talking about? Come on, man. No.
You don't have to think about it, dude.
I got this quote because you said you didn't know much about Klaus Schwab. I made it my job to, as soon as this happened, I'm like, okay, this guy's their front man. Let me learn about the official history of the World Economic Forum. I got their 40-year history. I got every book that Klaus Schwab has written or ghostwritten. I went through those books. This is one of the most interesting passages.
Come on, man. Come on.